2001: A Space Odyssey is a film that has really had a profound impact on me, to say the least. It is a truly transcending experience, not just in its visuals, but in its storytelling, its methodical edits, symmetrical framework, decelerated pacing, and its relaxing yet chilling sound design. It's an analogy for human nature, our continued meddling in our advancements in technology, our reliance on said technology, and evolution. It's not a film that I find particularly entertaining, and yet I find myself rather addicted to this film. 2001 is a film you can watch and get something from it, but when you watch it again, you get something from it, but it ain't exactly the same. It's one of the few films that is different every time you watch it, or at least it feels that way. It's not necessarily because the film itself is changing, it's your perception of what's going on in the film that changes every time you watch it, and it is for that reason that I genuinely cannot stop analyzing this film. In this video, I'm not going to try and answer the question, what is this movie actually trying to say? Because, let's face it, the only person who truly knows the answer to that question is long gone. What this video is gonna be is basically me reviewing the film, but more so analyzing it and explaining my own interpretation of various sequences, as well as the film as a whole. So without further ado, let's do this. The film opens with the dawn of man. Okay, that was a little overdramatic. Anyway, the images of a desolate African landscape in which early man lives in fear and is hunted. These scenes lock me into a sense of pure wonderment. In these scenes, early man is completely at the mercy of nature and completely controlled by the fear of predators that hunt them and itself, as early humans fight each other for control of the territory. That is right up until the Monolith shows up. The Monolith's first appearance is chilling. There's no build-up, you don't even see how it gets there. Early man just wakes up and it's there. It just shows up! On top of that is the Monolith's theme, Requiem, which Gheorghe Ligeti made using 2 mixed choirs and an orchestra. And this theme is chill-inducing. It gives off a sense of foreboding danger, but also a hint of ambiguity and mysteriousness because of how otherworldly this theme truly sounds. I also love the simplicity of the Monolith because it defies expectations. When you think of an alien race, or God even, more on that later, you think of something that is unimaginable, something that the human mind couldn't possibly comprehend. But when the Monolith shows up, it's literally what the name suggests. A monolith, a rectangle, or if you want to be mathematically correct, a cuboid. The audience expected something unimaginable, and in a way, they kind of did despite the simplicity, because when you think of an alien race or God, you don't really expect it to be in the shape of a cuboid. But despite its simplicity, the movie does such a fantastic job of building mystery and suspense around this object that you just can't help but be enthralled by it. At first, the humans are fearful of the monolith, but as the scene progresses, they become seduced by it. Like there's something gravitating them towards it, whether it's their own curiosity or the monolith itself. Afterwards, we see one of them fiddling around with a pile of bones, and they realize that these bones can be used as tools. This then leads to more of them using this tool, and a few of them even end up standing on 2 feet. When they try to fight off another group, they resort to violence, and they even use their tools to kill one of the other group. In this moment, the tool has become a weapon. One of them throws their weapon into the air, and one of the most, if not the most, iconic edits takes place. The transition from the past to the future, in which we observe man's expansion into space. There are many theories as to what the device we're seeing here actually is. Some say it's a satellite, others a spaceship, and some say it's a nuclear device of some kind. Personally, I think this is a nuclear device because I feel that it makes sense to transition from a tool that was transformed into man's most primitive weapon to arguably man's most advanced and dangerous weapon, which is a more profound idea to me. Beyond the film's metaphors, the film's technical achievement is truly awe-inspiring. Many of the shots of the spacecraft still look incredible to this day. There isn't a single one of these shots that doesn't convey a striking sense of realism, especially in the design of the spacecrafts, both exterior and interior. In fact, the designs of the spacecrafts, the space stations, and the technological advancements featured within the film evoke their own sense of realism so strongly that it presents a future that genuinely feels like it could one day become a reality, for better or for worse. These effects are so good that there are still conspiracy theories floating around about Kubrick's involvement in faking the moon landing. The moon landing. Perhaps the most visually striking sequence in the film is the space bridge sequence. I have never seen a sequence that is so vibrant in its explosion of color, yet so foreboding in its ambiguity. The film suggests that despite our advancements in technology, mankind has infantilized itself, demonstrated in this incredible medium close-up of a pen floating in zero-G, which suggests that mankind has become so advanced and powerful that we've lost control of our own tools. We've lost so much control that in space, we're literally learning how to do things that we learned as babies, such as how to walk, how to eat, and even how to use the bathroom. The things literally have instructions on the doors. We've also become detached from one another, shown when Dr. Floyd calls his daughter from space to wish her a happy birthday but can't actually make it to her birthday because of the discovery of the monolith on the moon and also space. It creates an irony because while technology connects Floyd to his daughter on Earth, it ironically represents the disconnect between Floyd and his daughter because of how far away he is from her due to being in space, creating a stark contrast between the disconnected humans of the future and the apes we see in the beginning who work together as one group and even sleep together as one group, suggesting that technological advancement, while in many ways brought mankind together, has ironically disconnected them even further, whether it's through space travel or acts of violence. All the man-made technology you see on display shows how far mankind has come due to its technological advancement, but it could also be seen as a metaphor for evolution, as the idea that technology has become so advanced that it has surpassed mankind cannot be more clearly conveyed than it is with HAL 9000, an artificially intelligent computer with the capacity to make his own judgments, decisions, and perhaps even have his own emotions. HAL is a terrifying force, not just because of the horrific acts of violence that he commits later in the film, but also because of how vastly intelligent he is compared to Dave and Frank. During a chess game between Hal and Frank, Hal tells Frank queen to bishop 3, bishop takes queen, knight takes bishop, mate. Frank just assumes Hal's assessment is right and accepts defeat. However, Hal didn't actually describe his moves properly. What he should have said is queen to bishop 6. He described a mate in 2 moves when actually Frank could have continued the game for longer, so Hal cheated. Also, yes, I had to Google that. I know, I'm ashamed too. My thinking is that Hal does this to test Frank, to see if he is truly capable of carrying out the mission. Oh, but it doesn't just stop there. Hal questions David about the mission and the odd things about the mission, such as the rumors of something being dug up on the moon, of course referring to the monolith. When David passes it off as Hal just doing a psychology check, Hal hesitates before answering, implying that he wasn't actually doing a psychology check. Creeped out yet? Good, so am I. It creates this foreboding sense of dread because Hal has control over every aspect of the ship and the crew completely rely on him to keep them alive. And yet he's asking all these weird questions and doing all these weird things as if he's testing them or trying to get information out of them somehow. And we soon learn exactly how much power Hal has over their lives. After Hal makes an error in inverted commas determining the cause of damage to the ship, David and Frank lose trust in Hal and begin to hatch a plan to shut Hal down, which Hal discovers by reading their fecking lips. His power over everyone is further demonstrated in an explosion of death, to say the least, as Hal cuts Frank's oxygen, sending him hurtling through space, and then cuts the life support to the other crew members who are asleep in hibernation pods, literally killing them in their sleep. This is a terrifying idea because Hal represents the advancement of technology beyond humanity, therefore gaining power over us. All that technological advancement, knowledge, and power for a machine that not only controls our lives, but can also dictate if we live or die, proving a shockingly accurate warning of our meddling tendencies and where they could lead us. It's even implied that Hal has the capacity to feel emotions. Not only can he mimic most of the abilities of the human brain at greater speed, but Dave also reveals that Hal acts like he has real emotions, but he also admits that the question surrounding whether or not Hal truly does have emotions can't be fully answered. I think Hal does have real emotions, because of the fact that he tries to kill everyone when he realizes that Dave and Frank are trying to shut him off. I would argue that he did this out of fear of being turned off. Hell, when David is deactivating Hal, he says, "My mind is going, I can feel it," and Hal even says, I'm afraid. Granted, he could have just said that in an attempt to trick Dave into not shutting him off, but still. The ultimate irony is that Hal's violent and seemingly fearful reaction mirrors that of Dave and Frank's reactions. When Hal makes an error, Dave and Frank lose trust in Hal, which causes them to want to deactivate Hal out of fear, which they develop due to their newfound lack of trust. To avoid being deactivated, Hal decides that he has to deactivate Dave and Frank. So he decides to try and deactivate them to avoid being deactivated, out of fear of being deactivated. Okay, I'll stop. Hal's violent response of killing the other crew members mirrors that of early Man when one group attacked another group and even resorted to killing one of them by violently smashing them to bits with stickies. That's a really intriguing idea to me because when you interpret it that way, Hal becomes the very thing he swore to destroy. This also leads me to one of my favorite aspects of this movie, the sound design. The sound design is absolutely incredible, particularly in the Jupiter mission scenes. Why? Because ironically, there isn't actually that much sound in this movie. In the spacewalk scenes, the sound design is so minimal that all you can hear is the compressed air and the astronauts breathing. There's not even any music, which I think was a wise decision because the lack of sound actually serves to remind us of the absolute danger of space travel. That danger is perfectly demonstrated in what is possibly the most terrifying death scene I've ever seen. Frank's out in space, and we hear the breathing and compressed air right up until Frank's oxygen is cut. And then, nothing. Literally nothing. No sound. No sound as he floats off into space to his death. It's so simplistic, but that's what makes this moment so chilling. It's communicated to us through literal, absolute silence. Let's talk about the monolith in the room. The monolith. The monolith is arguably the most mysterious element of this movie. Who or what is it? Where did it come from? What's its purpose? Does it have a purpose? Are there more of them? Or do we only see the one? There are many interpretations of who or what this thing could be. An alien race that is simply observing the evolution of the human race? Or perhaps a creator of some kind, e.g. God? I personally think it's a mixture of the two. On the one hand, the monolith can be seen as a god because the apes in the beginning don't evolve until after it appears, suggesting that the monolith triggers the evolution of man somehow. That and it turns Dave into a space fetus. That said, it can also be seen as an alien observer. In the final 20 minutes, Dave finds himself trapped in a room of sorts. This room is structured like it's a cage, as if something has placed him in this cage so that it can observe him. In a series of cuts, Dave grows older and older until he is on his deathbed, and then finally, the monolith appears. In that way, both theories check out, but what I find most interesting about this moment is that in the series of wide shots of Dave reaching out towards the monolith appears to be overwhelming in terms of how tall it stands above Dave, which calls back to when it stood over the apes in the beginning and over the scientists on the moon. And this, coupled with the various low-angle shots that look up at the monolith, suggests that the monolith is in some way looking down on Dave, like a god looking down on its own creation. This idea is strengthened by the image of Dave reaching out to the monolith like Adam reaching out to God in Michelangelo's famous painting. However, unlike God in the painting, the monolith doesn't reach back. And yes, I know the thing doesn't have limbs, but nonetheless, I still think this is significant because the idea that the monolith doesn't reach back implies that the monolith is looking down at Dave in disapproval and perhaps disappointment. Up to this point, man has relied on violence and technological advancement to survive. So much so that man has not only infantilized itself, but has also become detached and disconnected from one another, and become reliant on its own creations to survive. Creations which also become reliant on violence to survive. In that way, the monolith transforming Dave into a space fetus is like God doing a revamp, literally starting from scratch in a sense, and has now created a being that doesn't rely on technological devices to survive in uncharted space. It's a new life, a new dawn. This also leads me to possibly my favourite element of this film, that being its circular structure. Through what seems like an obsession with circles, Stanley Kubrick creates a semantic field of circles. Kubrick's love of circles can be seen in the way certain shots are framed, the planets, the design of many of the spacecrafts featured in the film, the interior of the ships, the way certain shots are constructed, such as the iconic shot of Frank jogging literally around the ship. This circular motif ties directly into its theme, a circular pattern of life, death, and rebirth. The film begins with ancient life, culminates with death, and closes with new life. This new life can arguably be seen as a new beginning because the imagery of a fetus in itself suggests that this new life will grow and develop beyond what we're currently seeing here. It literally brings a story full circle just as perfectly as it does thematically. It's probably my favorite use of visual storytelling because it takes the motif of circles and doesn't just tie it directly into its theme, but it also uses it to tell the film's story, which helps to create multi-layered meaning. With 2001: A Space Odyssey, Stanley Kubrick made bold and fascinating choices. While the film's spectacularly slow pacing may feel like a drag for some, and honestly I would not blame you for criticizing the film for that, especially if you look at this film as a piece of entertainment, I don't really view this movie as a film that is meant to entertain, especially considering how slow the pacing is, the verging on relaxing sound design, methodical editing, and symmetrical framing. Instead, I view it as a film that's trying to warn us more than anything, to warn us of our meddling tendencies and our reliance on technology, as well as the day that our technology may one day overthrow us. But it's also a film about evolution, showcasing what we could become if we continue down the path that we are currently walking, a path that we are walking on for better or for worse. But what keeps me coming back to this film again and again is simply the fact that every time I rewatch it, it's like I'm watching it for the first time ever. It's a movie that you can watch again and again and find something new that could potentially change how you view certain sequences or potentially the film as a whole. I'm even willing to bet that when I inevitably watch this again after this video, my whole interpretation could very well change. And that is why 2001: A Space Odyssey is one of my favorite movies of all time. 2001: A Space Odyssey, of course, gets a 10 out of frickin' 10. So those are my thoughts on Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey, a film that I would argue is Stanley Kubrick's masterpiece. Thank you so much as always for watching, but before I go, I would just like to ask you guys, what did you think of 2001: A Space Odyssey? Did you think it was good? Did you think it was bad? Did you think it was somewhere in the middle? Please leave your thoughts down in the comments below, and I will indeed see you guys in the next one. Until next time, live long and prosper, and may the Force be with you always.